My mother ruined my childhood, sabotaged my future, and mocked me when I became homeless. So I exposed the secrets that cost her everything. For years, she made sure I failed. Not by accident, not by bad luck, by design. She controlled the money. She controlled the story. And she convinced everyone else that I was the problem. When I had nothing left, no home, no stability, no support, she smiled. That was the moment I stopped asking why. Because while she believed she had won, said I was lucky to have such a dedicated mother. Inside those walls, nothing was safe. Every day felt like a test. I didn't know the rules to. A wrong look, a late reply, and she meant it. There were nights when I wasn't allowed to sleep in my room, days when I wasn't allowed to eat, weeks when silence was my punishment, and silence was worse than yelling. When I tried to talk about it, no one believed me. She's your mother, they said. She's just strict. You must be exaggerating. I learned quickly that telling the truth only made things worse. By the time I reached my teenage years, the damage was already done. School became difficult, not because I wasn't capable, but because I was exhausted. I studied when I could. I tried when I had the strength. But living in survival mode leaves very little room for ambition. She noticed my struggles and used them against me. See, she would say, this is why you'll never succeed. You'd be nothing without me. And the worst part was, for a long time, I believed her. College was supposed to be my escape. She promised support, stability, a fresh start. What she gave me instead was another trap. Deadlines sabotaged, money withheld at the last minute, constant pressure, constant fear. Every step forward was met with something designed to pull me back. By the time everything finally collapsed, I wasn't surprised, just tired. And when I lost my place to live, when I had nowhere left to go, she didn't offer help. She offered judgment. That was when I understood. This was never about discipline. It was about power. And she never intended to let go. The collapse didn't happen suddenly. It came in pieces. Missed deadlines, unpaid fees, promises that arrived too late, or not at all. Every time I tried to stabilize my life, something essential disappeared. A payment that was forgotten, a document that was misplaced, support that was promised and quietly withdrawn. By the time I realized this wasn't coincidence, it was already too late. I failed out of school, not because I didn't care, not because I didn't try, but because surviving had become my full-time job. When I finally left the house, I expected distance to help. It didn't. Without money, without family backing, and without anywhere to land, I started drifting. Couches, temporary rooms, places where you're welcome, as long as you don't stay too long. I learned how to carry everything I owned in one bag. I learned which places stayed warm at night. I learned how to disappear in public, and through all of it, she stayed comfortably where she was. We spoke only a few times, short conversations, cold and transactional. The last time I asked for help, I didn't ask for much, just enough to keep a roof over my head, just enough to buy time. She listened. Then she laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly, amused. She told me I was irresponsible, that I had made my own choices. That failure suited me. That laugh did something to me. It stripped away the last illusion I had, that she ever intended to see me succeed. After that, I stopped reaching out. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped hoping. Instead, I started observing. Because when you have nothing left, you notice things you used to ignore. Her lifestyle didn't match her income. Her stories didn't line up. Details changed depending on who was listening, and once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing it. Old paperwork she never thought I'd remember. Conversations that didn't make sense. Financial decisions that didn't add up. For the first time, I wondered, what else had she taken that didn't belong to her? And more importantly, How long had she been lying about it? The discovery didn't come from confrontation. It came from paperwork. When you lose everything, you start collecting fragments of your life. Old emails, old files, documents you never thought mattered. I was looking for proof of something else entirely when I found the first inconsistency. A bank statement that didn't match the timeline, an account I didn't recognize, a deposit that appeared shortly after my grandfather passed away. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Then I found another, and another. The numbers were too clean, too regular, too intentional. My grandfather, on my father's side, had always been careful, meticulous, the kind of man who documented everything. He never trusted verbal promises. He believed paper was truth. So, when I requested copies of old records, things I was legally entitled to, I wasn't expecting much. What I received instead was a missing chapter of my life. A will, dated 3 years earlier, properly filed, properly witnessed, and never given to me. According to that document, I wasn't just mentioned. I was the primary beneficiary. Funds meant for my education. Money set aside for housing. Assets placed in trust. Until I reached a certain age. Money that should have kept me afloat. When everything else fell apart. Money that disappeared. I didn't panic. I didn't celebrate. I read the document again, and again, and again. The signatures were real. The dates were real. The instructions were explicit. There was no legal ambiguity. Someone had intercepted it, redirected it, buried it. There was only one person, with access to everything required, to make that happen. And suddenly, her confidence made sense. Her comfort, her calm, her laughter. She hadn't just watched me fail. She had funded it. For days, I said nothing. I didn't accuse her. I didn't hint. I didn't let on that I knew. Instead, I watched her closely for the first time, the way she avoided certain topics, the way she shut down conversations about money, the way she became defensive when family finances were mentioned, and then, by accident or instinct, she realized something had changed. She started calling, asking questions, fishing for reassurance. "Everything okay?" she asked once. "School, work, life." I told her I was fine, and that terrified her, because people who have nothing to hide aren't afraid of silence. From that moment, she had experience. I spoke to professionals, but never all at once, never with the full picture. A clerk here, an advisor there, a single question at a time. Each answer confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. And still, I said nothing. At home, she grew uneasy. Her calls became more frequent. Her messages more polite, almost careful. She asked about my plans, my finances, my future. She wanted to know if I was desperate, because desperation is predictable. Calm is not. When I stopped reacting, she started making mistakes. Small ones, but meaningful. An email sent to the wrong address. A comment made too casually. A document referenced that I was never supposed to know existed. Each slip tightened the net. I didn't confront her, because confrontation would warn her. Instead, I let systems do what people never did for me. Records, processes, timelines, the kind of things that don't care who you are, or how convincing your smile is. By the time she realized something was truly wrong, the groundwork was already finished. She still believed she could talk her way out. She was wrong, because the moment she stole my future, she tied hers to a lie, and lies, once documented, don't negotiate. The first consequence didn't arrive loudly. There were no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, no accusations, just a letter, official, neutral, impossible to argue with. She received it on a Tuesday. I know because she called me less than an hour later. Her voice was calm, but it was the wrong kind of calm. Too measured, too careful. She asked if I had received any mail recently, if anyone had contacted me about family matters. I told her no, and for the first time, I heard fear slip through her words. Over the next few weeks, more letters followed, requests for clarification, notices of review, questions that demanded documentation, the kind of questions that only appear when something is already wrong. Her routines changed. She stopped spending as freely, canceled trips, delayed purchases, started watching every dollar. She spoke less, smiled less, snapped more often. The woman who once controlled every room now avoided conversations altogether. Then came the second consequence. Her accounts were flagged. Nothing frozen yet. Nothing seized. Just enough to make movement difficult. Enough to make sleep impossible. She began reaching out to relatives, fishing for information, testing loyalty. She needed someone to confirm that she was still in control. But control doesn't survive scrutiny. Behind the scenes, everything she had built was being taken apart, transaction by transaction, signature by signature, date by date. She wasn't being accused, she was being examined, and that terrified her more than any accusation ever could. One evening, she confronted me directly. She asked if I knew what was happening to her. I looked at her and said, "I thought you said money problems were my fault." She didn't respond, because for the first time, the story she had told for years no longer worked. The narrative was gone. The protection was gone. All that remained were facts, and facts don't care. Who raised you? By the time she understood, this wasn't something she could escape. It was already too late. The process had begun, and it wasn't stopping. Once the pressure started, it didn't stay contained. Systems talk to each other. Records connect. Questions spread. What began as a review quickly became a pattern. Banks stopped being polite. Advisors stopped returning calls. Longtime contacts suddenly became unavailable. People who once defended her started distancing themselves, not because they knew everything, but because they sensed something was wrong. She noticed it too. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. Conversations ended early. The confidence she once wore so easily was replaced by irritation, then suspicion, then panic. At home, she became unpredictable. Some days, she was quiet, withdrawn, almost fragile. Other days, she was furious, snapping at anyone nearby, blaming everyone except herself. She accused coworkers of betrayal, family members of disloyalty, strangers of plotting against her. But no one was plotting. The truth was doing its job. Then came the call she didn't expect. A formal request. An in-person meeting. Documentation required. This wasn't optional. For the first time, she had to explain herself, without controlling the conversation, without rewriting history, without intimidation. And she failed. Stories contradicted each other. Dates didn't align. Explanations changed mid-sentence. The charm that once protected her did nothing now, because charm doesn't survive verification. Word spread quickly, not details, not accusations, just the fact that she was under review. And that was enough. Her workplace placed her on leave, not as punishment, but as procedure. Friends stopped defending her. They didn't want to be associated with questions that had no answers. Family gatherings became tense, awkward, short. She still tried to reach me. Her messages shifted tone, from authority to negotiation to something dangerously close to apology. I didn't respond, because at this stage, silence wasn't cruelty. It was accountability. The life she had carefully curated, the image, the respect, the control, was dissolving in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The final exposure didn't come from me. It came from a room she couldn't control. No raised voices, no shouting, no emotional appeals, just a table, a few chairs, and a stack of documents. She walked in confident, not calm, but practiced. She believed this was still a conversation, still something she could manage, with the right words. It wasn't. They started with timelines, simple questions, clear requests. Where did the funds go? Who authorized the transfer? Why was the beneficiary never notified? At first, she answered smoothly, prepared, rehearsed. But paperwork has a way of stripping stories down to facts. Dates contradicted her explanations. Signatures didn't match her claims. Transactions appeared where none should exist. Each time she adjusted her story, another document appeared. Quietly, methodically, the room changed. Her confidence faded, replaced by irritation, then frustration, then something closer to fear. She tried shifting blame, administrative error, miscommunication, someone else's responsibility. None of it held, because every path led back to her. The will, the trust, the redirection of funds, all documented, all verified, all undeniable. When the questions stopped, no one raised their voice. They didn't need to. She was informed that the matter would proceed formally, that accounts would be frozen, that assets would be reviewed, that employment status would be reconsidered, that consequences were no longer optional. For the first time in my life, I saw her without armor. No authority, no control, no audience to manipulate. Just a person, facing the weight of her own decisions. She looked at me then, not with anger, not with hatred, with disbelief, as if she still couldn't understand how the child she broke had survived long enough to stand there. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Everything she had denied for years was now on record, and records don't forget. As she was escorted out, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, not joy, relief, because the truth had finally done what I never could. It ended her power. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. There were no headlines, no public spectacle, no moment where everything suddenly felt right. Instead, there were notifications, official updates, status changes, final decisions. Her accounts were frozen first, not permanently, but long enough to make reality unavoidable. Access revoked, spending restricted, every transaction monitored. Then came the professional consequences. Her leave became termination, not announced loudly, just quietly confirmed. Years of carefully built reputation, reduced to a short explanation. Policy violations under review. People stopped asking questions after that. Some distanced themselves out of fear, others out of convenience, a few out of shame. Family reactions were mixed. Some were angry, not at her, but at me. They said I should have handled it privately, that I should have protected her, that I should have let it go. Others stayed silent, which told me everything I needed to know. No one defended her actions. They just didn't like the outcome. Legal processes continued, without emotion. Money was traced, assets were reassessed, responsibility was reassigned to where it always belonged. What was taken from me was formally acknowledged. Not all of it could be recovered. Time doesn't refund itself, but enough was restored to give me something I'd never had before: stability. As for her, the woman who once controlled everything, she faded, not vanished, not destroyed, just reduced to reality. No more influence, no more leverage, no more ability to rewrite the past. The power imbalance that defined my life for so long was finally gone, and with it, the constant pressure I'd lived under since childhood. I didn't feel victorious. I felt quiet, because when justice is real, it doesn't shout, it settles. After everything was finished, life didn't suddenly become easy. There was no moment where the past stopped existing, no switch that turned pain into peace. But there was space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to make choices, without fear hanging over every decision. For the first time, my future wasn't something someone else could take from me. I used what was recovered carefully, not recklessly, not emotionally. I paid off what I owed, found stable housing, returned to the plans that had once felt impossible. Simple things mattered more now. Consistency, routine, quiet mornings, without anxiety. I didn't try to rebuild relationships that had only survived through denial. Some bridges were better left untouched. I forgave selectively, not to make anyone else comfortable, but to free myself from carrying weight that was never mine to begin with. As for my mother, I don't celebrate her downfall. I don't revisit it. I don't relive it. She exists in my life now, as a closed chapter. Not erased, not excused, just finished. What happened to her wasn't revenge. It was consequence. And what happened to me wasn't luck. It was survival. If there's anything I learned, it's this: silence protects abuse. Documentation ends it. Truth doesn't need anger. It needs patience. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop begging to be believed and start letting facts speak for you. This story isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming what was taken and choosing, finally, to move forward.